Let's do this.
Good evening, everyone. This is John Tapp with the Kenworth W900 flat top sleeper, which is a 72-inch. And as we honor our twin towers while we're driving this, beginning with New Mexico. And it's going to be for
keep left, and then
fresh
turn left.
bananas and
Turn left.
at Walmart and in Rio. So basically these I had helps with my
keep
speed,
right,
here in
and then
Florida.
exit right.
So for the meantime, let's go for a ride.
Exit right. Keep right, and then exit right. Exit right. Turn left. all over now. Time to hit the road. Recomputing.
Visitors, including Charlie Kirk, he told me, and he said that there's no real rule of thumb for how many officers you need for a given size of event or for other factors such as whether to have checkpoints. And he says really the level of security should be a function of Orlando, that they redid their whole security layout for big events and football games.
Yeah, I want to go back to that point he made about freedom on campus. Free speech has been such a live issue on college campuses for other reasons in recent months. Could incidents like this make it less likely that campuses will invite controversial speakers?
No, there's no doubt that's a concern for people like Robert Shibley. He's the special counsel for campus advocacy at FIRE. You may have heard of him. That's the Foundation for Individual Rights and Expression. Every year, that group does a survey of college students, and the 2025 survey just came out right before the Utah shooting. It showed a slight increase in the percentage of students who say it's acceptable to shout down certain speakers. That's at 72%. And there was an increase in how many say it's acceptable to use violence, at least in some cases, to shut down a speaker. That was up a couple of points to 34%.
The more acceptable people see violence as being, the more likely we are to see people resort to that. And, you know, the real nightmare scenario would be sort of a tit-for-tat escalation, attempting to silence one another with political violence.
Is there reason, Martin, to believe, is there data to support the idea that this kind of violence is trending up on college campuses?
You know, campus security experts tell me no. They say, if anything, things were probably worse about 7 or 8 years ago, back during the first Trump administration, when some of these alt-right provocateurs, such as Milo Yiannopoulos, would go to campuses and sort of provoke a big reaction. And during those years, free speech groups such as FIRE would accuse the colleges of using undefined safety concerns as an excuse to cancel or restrict those appearances. That phenomenon was sometimes called the heckler's veto. And anecdotally, security experts say now that has become a lot rarer. But after this shooting, one of them said he hopes we won't be seeing a new kind of veto when it comes to free speech, what he called the assassin's veto.
Wow. And Piers Martin Costi, thank you.
You're welcome.
The world lost an icon when Latin jazz pioneer Eddie Palmieri died last month. His music lives on through recordings, but also through sheet music. That's thanks in part to a publisher in rural California. As KVPR's Carrie Klein reports, this pioneer has helped make the work of Palmieri and other Latin jazz artists available to the world from his home office in Madera.
Steve Alcala is a music teacher and trumpet player. He joined a mariachi band in high school, studied jazz in college, and in the 1980s became a high school music teacher. It was then that he heard something that changed his life.
I go, whoa, this is cool. cool. I love this.
It was Latin jazz. Think salsa and American jazz and Afro-Caribbean rhythms all woven together, like in this piece by Eddie Palmieri.
I was thinking to myself, man, I think the kids would really like playing this stuff.
But there was a problem. He couldn't find the sheet music that would help his kids learn.
That's their textbook. Just like math, you have to have a textbook.
Pioneers who were performing Latin jazz typically weren't sharing their sheet music beyond their bands. That left students and musicians outside of major jazz scenes without an easy way to learn the music. So Alcala set out on a painstaking task.
I had to do all the transcribing myself from records I used to listen to.
He'd literally write down the musical arrangements he heard, note by note, sometimes for 10 or 15 different instruments.
And the kids really loved it.
So did other band leaders. They started asking him where he found this music, and that got him thinking.
And then I says, you know what, there's a need here for that, so I'm going to go ahead and start a publishing company.
He started cold calling the biggest performers.
And then I give them my spiel about teaching Latin jazz at Roosevelt High School, and would I be able to get their arrangements from them.
The idea took off. Alcala named his company 3-2 Music. It's a nod to a common Afro-Caribbean rhythm. Now, Alcala publishes sheet music by more than 70 Latin jazz composers and pays them royalties.
Japan buys a lot of music from me. Germany loves Latin jazz. Austria. And there was one particular group that played in Iraq during the war.
Military bands, and especially school bands, are his biggest customers, including the Jazz Orchestra at Fresno State University. The band's director, Richard Lloyd Giddens Jr., was Alcala's student back in the 90s. He's now using that same sheet music he played with his students. He says before 3-2 Music, teaching Latin jazz was nearly impossible.
And now there's an outlet, there's a vehicle, there's a platform where this music exists, that people can find this music and perform it.
Giddens students like Trevor Kabose say they're grateful to have access to this genre.
Latin music, Afro-Cuban music, West African music has such a profound effect on my life and everything I do in music.
Composers appreciate 3-2 Music as well. One of the first to publish with the company was Oscar Hernandez. He's won 3 Grammys, and yet he says hearing students play his work is a thrill.
For me to see young people learning the music, man, that's where it all starts.
And Latin jazz experts say that by giving more students access to this music, Alcala and his business have helped popularize it around the world. For NPR News, I'm Carrie Klein in Fresno.
You're listening to All Things Considered from NPR News.
Support for NPR comes from this station and from Visit St. Pete Clearwater, Florida, where white sand beaches meet the arts, from the Dali Museum to more than 500 public murals. More at visitspc.com. From the University of Maryland Libraries, committed to reimagining learning, advancing the public good, and empowering research that creates a better future for everyone. More at lib.umd.edu. From Progressive Insurance, home of the Name Your Price tool, so drivers can see coverage options. At progressive.com or 1-800-PROGRESSIVE. Price and coverage match limited by state law. And from the John D. and Catherine T. MacArthur Foundation at macfound.org.
Minute before 6 on the evening before Friday, and you're listening to All Things Considered on News 87. Heading in on the North Freeway southbound 45, the Record Cross Timbers has been cleared. You'll find it sluggish from around Mount Houston. And we're at 5.5 hours now for that operation to clear a wreck and a spill on the West Loop, northbound direction of 610, right around Beach Nut. You'll be slow coming up from South Coast Hook. Sunset at 7:31, clear overnight with a low around 76. Tomorrow's sunrise at 7:05. Tomorrow through Monday, we are expecting more sunny days and clear nights. Afternoon highs around 92, 95. Overnight lows around 79. Pretty much in line with the averages. And a slight chance of scattered pop-up showers Tuesday and Wednesday. Right now it's 91 here at your NPR station, KUHF Houston News 88.7. The surface of the University of Houston at 6 o'clock.
My call to action
heartbroken about this, to tell them to not give up, but get activated and get involved.
As young conservatives try to make sense of Charlie Kirk's murder, many are asking what's next for the movement he started.
For Thursday, September 11th, this is All Things Considered from NPR News.
I'm Mary Louise Kelly.
And I'm Juana Summers. Ahead this hour, inflation inches higher with both your morning coffee and the gas for your car costing a little more.
I'm no economist, but I think we will see prices start to rise across the board.
Meanwhile, Quelle Horreur, a British bottle, has won champion sparkling wine at the International Wine Challenge.
It's the first time a non-champagne has taken the top prize.
You think of England, you think of rain, and indeed it does rain here, and it is a cooler climate, but we have this beautiful ridge of soils going through the south.
What happens when the king of bubbles gets dethroned? After the news.
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Dan Ronan. As a manhunt continues for the shooter who killed right-wing activist Charlie Kirk, many who attended the Utah event say they're in shock. NPR's Kirk Ziegler reports from the campus of Utah Valley University.
Elliot Thorne says he and his family were about 10 feet away from where Charlie Kirk was speaking when the bullet hit him.
It took us about 3-4 seconds for us to register what happened, and then at that moment I had to dive on my 16-month-old and my wife. I didn't know if it was a mass shooter.
Thorne came back to campus hoping to get their stroller they left behind, but it's now an active crime scene. A self-described staunch conservative, he says he's devastated.
You know, I just hope and pray during this experience across the country that we can start to really genuinely find a way to come together as a people.
Vigils are occurring across the country, including one planned here Friday night. Kirk Ziegler, NPR News, Orem, Utah.
In Lower Manhattan at Ground Zero, dignitaries and families of the fallen mark 24 years since the 9/11 attacks killed nearly 3,000 people. To this day, the deadliest attack of terror on U.S. soil in the nation's history. NPR's Quill Lawrence reports from New York.
A somber ceremony is held each year at the site where the Twin Towers collapsed after being struck by hijacked airliners that morning in 2001. Loved ones read out the names of the people who died.
Jeremiah Joseph Ahern.
Joanne Marie Aladiotis.
The current and several past mayors of New York attended, along with the governors of New York and New Jersey. This day also marks the beginning of a global war on terror, which has killed thousands of American troops and hundreds of thousands, most of them civilians, in places like Iraq and Afghanistan. Quill Lawrence, NPR News.
Missouri lawmakers want to make it much harder for citizens to amend the state constitution. St. Louis Public Radio's reporter Jason Rosenbaum says the move from the GOP state legislature comes after voters approved a slew of progressive ballot items.
Missouri Republicans want to require any constitutional amendment put on the ballot through the initiative petition process to pass in a statewide vote and in all 8 congressional districts. State Senator Brad Hudson says the Constitution is too easy to amend. Missourians recently passed amendments protecting abortion rights, legalizing marijuana, and expanding Medicaid, which won with support in cities but not rural areas.
I think you should have broad consensus throughout the state of Missouri before you amend the Constitution.
Detractors of the plan say it will make it basically impossible for most amendments to pass. If lawmakers pass it this week, it will go to the voters for their approval. For NPR News, I'm Jason Rosenbaum in St. Louis.
And you're listening to NPR News.
Live from News 88.7 in Houston, I'm Gail DeLauder. Some Houston area teachers are facing criticism over comments they made on social media about the assassination of conservative activist Charlie Kirk. News 88.7's Sarah Gruneau has the latest.
The comments were made by former and current employees at Goose Creek, Pasadena, and Dickinson independent school districts. They quickly garnered backlash and statements from the school districts denouncing hateful speech. Republican state representatives Briscoe Cain and Terry Leo Wilson were among those who took to social media to call for their firings. One of the posts was made by a woman identified as a teacher from Goose Creek ISD. She suggested Kirk's death could have been, quote, the consequences of his actions catching up with him. In response, Superintendent Randall O'Brien said the district doesn't tolerate hateful or violent rhetoric for anyone representing the district. I'm Sarah Grunow, News 88.7.
Houston Mayor John Whitmire is postponing his annual State of the City address. He was supposed to give it later this month at the Hilton Americas Hotel. But News 88.7's Kyle McClinigan says a strike by hotel workers has now moved into a second week.
In a statement, Whitmire said he canceled the event out of respect for the ongoing contract negotiations between Hilton and union workers. A union representative welcomed Whitmire's support, saying they have continued to call on Hilton to make an agreement that addresses their needs. The strike has gained some national attention, with Vermont Senator Bernie Sanders voicing his support in a social media post on Wednesday. Sanders says he sent a letter to Hilton asking them to pay the workers a fair wage. The strike at the hotel began on Labor Day and has been extended through September 20th. Workers are calling for pay raises of at least $23 an hour. A Hilton spokesperson said the company was committed to negotiating in good faith. I'm Kyle McClinigan, News 88.7.
Astros baseball in Toronto this afternoon. They melted the Blue Jays 6-0. Clear skies this evening, low expected around 75 degrees. For tomorrow, it should be mostly sunny and the high around 93. I'm Gail DeLauder, News 88.7.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include the Alfred P. Sloan Foundation, supporting books, radio, podcasts, film, television, theater, and more to bridge science and the humanities. And the listeners who support this NPR station.
This is All Things Considered from NPR News. I'm Juana Summers.
I'm Mary Louise Kelly.
And I'm Ari Shapiro. For many young conservatives, Charlie Kirk was more than just another political activist or online personality. He was the face of their movement, a glimpse at how life for their generation could look by embracing a more hard-right MAGA worldview. The fact that this agenda was anathema to his many progressive critics was the sweetener on top. Today, Kirk's followers are in shock and grief over his assassination on the campus of Utah Valley University on Wednesday. As they try to make sense of Kirk's killing, many are also asking what's next for the movement he started. NPR political reporter Elena Moore is covering this. Hey, Elena.
Hey, Ari.
You've been following Charlie Kirk for years. He had this huge network of followers. What are you hearing from them today?
A lot of his supporters are hurting right now. You know, Kirk was a controversial political figure, reviled by many on the left, but he was extremely celebrated by the MAGA movement, especially young organizers and activists who came of age in it. Remember, you know, he had millions of followers and had become a big media personality, but he was also the head of a massive political organizing network and even helped, you know, some folks decide to run for office themselves. That includes Florida Congresswoman Anna Paulina Luna. She's 36 and in many ways got her start because of Kirk. When she met him, she was on track to start medical school and ended up scrapping that plan to work for his group, Turning Point USA. I spoke to her this morning and she was very shaken up.
Saw a lot of videos online after I had to watch my friend bleed out of people celebrating his death. That should be condemned and removed from polite society.
And she told me she really owes her political career to Kirk, and that's a common theme I've heard from many of his followers today, that he inspired them.
What made him so impactful for young conservatives?
He entered the national conversation at a time when there weren't a lot of voices like his. He started Turning Point USA in 2012 when he was just 18. And Ari, I mean, think about that time. Former President Obama was extremely popular with young people, and Kirk gave folks a place to really revel in what was then seen as a political counterculture to that. You know, things, I have to say, though, look different now. Kirk has evolved into a close ally. You know, he evolved into a close ally of President Trump and played a key role in helping move many young voters towards the president.
And how big is that organization he started, Turning Point, in Republican politics today?
Oh, it's grown into a massive organization. They report having more than 800 chapters on college campuses. The group has also launched a bunch of connected nonprofits and reported an annual revenue of roughly $100 million. And to fans of Kirk, it's really hard to overstate his influence in developing a new generation of conservative leaders. This is 33-year-old Hayden Paget, the chairman of the Young Republican National Federation.
The impact Charlie was building was not about finding politicians and putting them in office today. It was about finding literally millions of young people who otherwise would never have heard conservative ideas and believe them and then now fight for them.
And Elena, what was it about the message Kirk was pushing that helped him gain such a big following and influence?
Well, he talked a lot about free speech, of course, and free markets and limited government, but he was also a conservative firebrand, and as with the rise of Trump, many of Kirk's ideas became and are now much more mainstream. And since Kirk first came on the scene years ago, the youth vote looks different. Last fall, Trump made serious gains with voters under 30. The day after the election, I actually spoke with Kirk about this, and I asked him to describe Trump's connection with young people. I asked him, was it about economic concerns, social issues? Here's what he told me.
They don't look at it as economic or social. There's one above. They just want to live in the same country as their parents. I don't know if that's a social issue or an economic issue. That's just, they want a nice life, and they feel it slipping away. They feel as if insanity is creeping into their institutions.
And Ari, that message I've heard from him a lot at events, and it's really one the party, I think, has adopted more broadly.
And so now that he's gone, what happens to the void that he leaves behind? Is the role that he played one that can be filled by someone else?
The young Republicans I've spoken with so far say no singular leader can fill Kirk's shoes, so to speak, but young organizers and content creators who were inspired by him seem to be starting that conversation. Bryland Hollyhand is one of those people. He's 19 and chairs the Republican Party's Youth Advisory Council. He posted a video on social media this morning calling for Kirk's memory to inspire his generation to get involved now.
That is NPR political reporter Elena Moore. Thank you.
Thanks, Ari.
Americans are paying more these days for both groceries and gasoline. Today, the Labor Department said the overall cost of living rose nearly 3% for the 12 months ending in August. That is a higher inflation rate than the Federal Reserve would like, but it is not expected to keep the Fed from easing up on interest rates next week. NPR's Scott Horsley's here with more. Hey.
Hi, good to be with you.
Good to talk to you. So, Scott, today's report shows that inflation was higher in August than the month before. What's getting more expensive? Is there more to it than just groceries and gas?
Yeah, a lot of necessities, including food, clothing, shelter, also some discretionary items like airfares and hotel rooms. Some of these price hikes reflect the cost of President Trump's tariffs, which increased for a lot of goods last month. Not surprisingly, the price of a lot of things we import, like clothing and small appliances, went up. In the supermarket, we saw higher prices for imported foods like bananas and coffee. Patrick Reardon is the head roaster at Palace Coffee in Amarillo, Texas. He buys about half his coffee beans from Brazil, and those beans now face an import tax of 50%.
I'm no economist, but I think we will see prices start to rise across the board. Everyone has, for the most part, been extremely supportive and kind and understanding because people are dealing with this in basically every facet of their day-to-day lives. The cost of everything is going up.
So far, only a fraction of the total tariff price tag has been passed along to consumers, but retail coffee prices are up more than 20% from this time last year.
The Federal Reserve usually fights inflation with higher interest rates, but now policymakers are expected to go in a different direction. Tell us how.
Yeah, right now I think the Fed is more concerned about propping up the weakening job market. This morning we got word that more than 250,000 people applied for unemployment benefits last week. That's the biggest surge in almost 4 years. Now, I don't want to make too much out of that. The weekly unemployment numbers bounce around a lot, but it is one of several signals that point to a real slowdown in the job market, which suggests the Fed should be cutting interest rates. Economist Kathy Bostjancic of Nationwide says the Fed's in a tough spot, though, as it tries to keep a lid on both inflation and unemployment.
That's a very uncomfortable position for Federal Reserve officials to be in. Inflation is running closer to 3% than 2%. But you're also seeing the labor market start to have cracks that are more and more visible and losing steam.
So the Fed is kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place, and these latest numbers suggest it's only getting rockier and harder.
And yet the stock market took off today. Help me understand this.
Yeah, the Dow soared more than 600 points today. All the major indexes closed at record highs. Investors are betting that even though inflation's up it's not up so much that it would prevent the Fed from cutting interest rates, and investors like lower interest rates. Now, the Fed is widely expected to cut its benchmark rate by 1/4 point next week, and forecasters think we could see additional rate cuts at the two Fed meetings after that in October and December. But Jancic says one reason Fed policymakers might be less nervous about rising prices is they think the tariff fallout will be short-lived.
The tariff-induced price increases have been pretty moderate, but they also should be one-time increases, assuming we don't get a whole nother raft of tariffs next year, which most people are not anticipating.
Keep in mind, an appeals court ruled a couple weeks ago that most of President Trump's tariffs are illegal, but they remain in place for now while we wait for a final decision from the U.S. Supreme Court. And the High Court is set to hear arguments in the tariff case in early November.
NPR's Scott Horsley, thank you.
You're welcome.
Sabrina Carpenter is dominating this week's Billboard charts. Her new album is shaking up both the albums chart and the songs chart. NPR's Stephen Thompson has the report.
Before the rise of streaming services, the Billboard Hot 100 singles chart was based on radio airplay and the sale of physical copies on vinyl, cassette, and CD. That made it unusual for one album to land more than a few songs on the chart simultaneously. But this week, every song on Sabrina Carpenter's new album, Man's Best Friend, charts in the top 40, 12 of them in all, starting with the new single Tears, which debuts at number 3. Is one of 2 Sabrina Carpenter songs to land in this week's top 5. The other, Man-Child, debuted at number 1 earlier this summer, dropped down for a while, and leapt back into the top 10 last week. With her 12 most recent songs all crashing the top 40, Sabrina Carpenter is also dominating the Billboard Albums chart. Man's Best Friend debuts at number 1, and it tops the individual charts for both sales and streaming. But she's also got another album in the top 10, as last year's Short and Sweet jumps to number 7. Short and Sweet served as a career breakthrough for Carpenter as she scored top 5 hits with Taste, Please, 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 and one of last summer's most inescapable songs, Espresso. Short and Sweet wasn't Sabrina Carpenter's first album. In fact, it was her 6th. The former Disney Channel star began releasing music more than a decade ago. Her current wave of chart success has even been enough to boost some of her earlier work. Her 2022 album, Emails I Can't Send, re-enters this week's Billboard Albums chart at number 31. Stephen Thompson, NPR Music.
You're listening to All Things Considered from NPR News.
At 6:18, you're with your NPR station, News 88.7. 90 Fahrenheit, 32 Celsius right now here at the UH campus. I'm David Pittman, and on the West Loop, 610 northbound direction of Beach Nut, we still have a couple of right lanes blocked with the cleanup of a wreck that happened nearly 6 hours ago. A big rig lost a load there, and for a while just recently, all 4 lanes were blocked. So, of course, you're going to be slow and go coming up from Meyerland.
In a historically tough job market, restaurants still need help.
Right now you hear that people might be not taking vacations, they might not be going out and making those big purchases, but people still want to go out to eat.
I'm Kai Risdal, Help Wanted. Next time on Marketplace.
It's coming your way next at 6:30, followed by the Daily at 7 o'clock.
I'm Maria Hinojosa, this week on Latino USA. Very few people win a MacArthur Genius Award. Cristina Jimenez did it because of her activism. Now she's written a book about transforming her fear of deportation into her activism and love of this country. That's this week on Latino USA.
We have that for you every Sunday evening at 7 o'clock on News 88.7. Support comes from members like you and from GenPro, a Houston-based home generator service, providing power to homes during unexpected outages, helping with connectivity and productivity. More information available at genpro.com. And from Texas Mutual Insurance Company, a workers' comp provider striving to build trust with businesses across the state through dedicated services. More information at texasmutual.com/Texas Deliver. The forecast stuck on repeat, clear nights and sunny days, overnight lows in the mid-70s, afternoon highs right around 92 to 95. Again, right now it's 90 here at the UH campus at 620.
Support for NPR comes from this station and from BritBox, committed to helping viewers to see it differently with British TV. With new original series like Code of Silence, about a deaf woman recruited as a lip reader in a high-stakes police investigation. Streaming at BritBox.com. And from Easy Cater, a business tool for food, designed to help organizations order food for meetings and events from restaurants nationwide, set up employee lunch programs, and manage food spend at easycater.com.
From NPR News, this is All Things Considered. I'm Juana Summers.
And I'm Mary Louise Kelly. 24 years ago today, September 11th, 2001, it was a pretty morning in New York. By about 8:30, the temperature was in the low 60s, bright blue sky, puffy clouds. By 9:15, two planes had smashed into the north and south towers of the World Trade Center, and the country was forever changed. So was then 25-year-old Alyssa Slotkin, a grad student at Columbia University 7 miles away.
The smell of the burning buildings and that very sort of toxic chemically smell that was just hanging over New York for weeks, if not months, and it completely changed my life. I mean, top to bottom.
That is Slotkin speaking to the Washington Post. She told the paper that the 9/11 attacks led her to a job at the CIA, later at the White House, the Pentagon. Her 2-decade national security career evolved into a political one. Alyssa Slotkin is now Senator Slotkin. The Michigan Democrat serves today on the Armed Services, Homeland Security, and Veterans Affairs Committees. Senator, welcome to All Things Considered.
Thanks for having me.
So when I started mapping out earlier this week what I wanted to ask you, I was definitely going to start with Israel's attack on Hamas leadership in Doha. And then Russian drones flew into Poland and NATO scrambled fighter jets to shoot them down. And suddenly we were watching NATO engaging enemy targets in NATO airspace for the first time. And then in Utah, in our country's latest horror of political violence, the conservative activist Charlie Kirk was shot and killed. I find it hard some days to wake up and know where to start, and I wonder if you feel that from your perch in the Senate.
Yeah, I mean, certainly I think I'm used to that in the national security context where, you can't control events that are happening abroad. I think it's the combination of those with just the events that are going on inside the country, just every single day, something new and different. It certainly feels saturating, and I know a lot of people have frankly just kind of decided they're going on a media diet. Yeah.
Which you can't do.
No,
nor can I.
No.
It's the fire hose every day. So the institutions that U.S. intelligence and national security has to deal with these are the institutions that were created in the wake of 9/11. And now the Trump administration is working to reshape many of those institutions, pushing through, for example, a nearly 50% cut at the director of National Intelligence on her staff, pushing out the leaders of the National Security Agency, the Defense Intelligence Agency. I could go on. What do you make of the current upheaval in the intelligence community in which you used to serve?
Yeah, I mean, look, it's difficult to watch.
Go straight on.
I can't tell you how dangerous I think it is to politicize intelligence. And, it's very hard to see some of these moves as anything other than attempting to shape the intelligence community to the will of Donald Trump. I believe that to be dangerous for the security of the United States. If there's a threat coming from abroad or, something happening, you have to call balls and strikes on that, or else people can get, deeply hurt.
I will note that Tulsi Gabbard, the director of National Intelligence, sees this totally the other way around. She says she is trying to get politics out of intelligence, that she's trying to restore the intelligence of the intelligence community. I wonder how fine a line it feels like you are walking as an elected U.S. Senator and a Democrat when you criticize the Trump administration. Does that risk wading into the politics of it all.
Well, but the thing is oftentimes I think Trump has the wrong answer to the right question. It's the way he goes about it. The wholesale slashing and burning of, things and organizations because he didn't like what they did in the last administration.
So you're not saying, hey, we couldn't do this better. You're saying this isn't the right approach.
I would say even further, I think with Trump doing what he's doing, let's actually take this as a moment not to just snap back to the same system we had before he came in, but take it as a moment to do a little rethinking of how we are organized as an intelligence community and a defense department and other issues as well. I don't like the Democratic response that's like, just maintain status quo. The status quo was not working.
What do you see as the biggest national security threat facing our country today?
I really believe that the existential threat to the country is not coming from abroad. It's the shrinking middle class at home and what that does to our stability here.
Explain.
I mean, if you want to understand why we are at this moment in our history, this fractious authoritarian moment where Americans are turned against each other. I mean, look at what just happened to Charlie Kirk. I mean, if you want to understand, why we are so polarized, to me, it is about the fact that just more and more Americans do not feel like they can save every month and live the American dream. And when you do that, when you can't provide for your kids what was provided to you, you feel shame, you feel anger, you feel cornered, and you start looking for someone to blame. And that is almost always someone who doesn't look like you or talk like you or pray like you.
So I was going to ask, because I hear you being critical of the approach that the Trump administration is taking, but you've also argued this is a moment of huge opportunity. Give me an example.
Sure. So we understand that it is important that we are, Americans maintain leadership roles in the world. We know we've made a lot of mistakes. If you're thinking about a different way of doing what we need to do to be postured for the future, I think we got to change the Defense Department. I think that our way of taking 12 years to go from idea for a new weapon system to actually fielding it doesn't work for the modern age. I think we have a problem with adopting technology fast enough. And that is a real threat to us when China can move, from idea to fielding in 5 years.
So circle back to that pretty morning in New York. Obviously what happened on 9/11 was horrific. But in the days that followed, the whole world stood with the United States. And Americans pulled together, set aside our political differences, which I'm describing that, and it sounds like a time capsule from a different planet. What, if anything, remains of that moment? What gives you hope?
Yeah. Gosh, I think about that moment. I thought about it a lot today because even in a place as cynical as New York City, people had their flags out. They were decent to each other. We were all on the same team. And I'm so glad that I got to be there in that moment to see that. And I'm so concerned with how far we feel from that moment. Look, what gives me hope is that I go home every weekend, and the vast majority of Michiganders live in that 80% middle that don't scream on the internet, that don't, want to hurt their neighbors when they happen to disagree. They just want team normal. I grew up, my dad's a lifelong Republican, my mom was a lifelong Democrat. It was totally normal when we grew up. And a lot of Michiganders really think about that time and wish for that time because we're very mixed politically. And that gives me hope that my practical, reasonable constituents get exhausted looking at the extremes and just want something normal. And I
to find our way back to the middle.
To find our way back. That keeps me buoyed.
Democratic Senator Alyssa Slotkin of Michigan, as you heard. Thank you for stopping by.
Thank you.
It's 6:29, and you've been listening to All Things Considered on News 88.7. Marketplace is 1 minute away.
I'm Jeremy Hobson. Next time on The Middle, a growing political battle over redistricting is brewing in states like California, Texas, and Missouri. But the issue of redistricting itself raises questions over what fair political representation actually looks like. So, do you feel represented by the political process? And what does fair representation look like to you? That's our question next time on The Middle.
It's coming your way 8 o'clock tonight, followed by Bullseye at 9 on News 88.7. Support comes from members like you and from John Moore, helping with plumbing, electrical, and air conditioning repairs, including out-of-warranty units since 1965. Details at 730-2525 or johnmooreservices.com. And from Live Nation, presenting Leon Bridges, the Crooner and Cowboy, September 21st at Cynthia Woods Mitchell Pavilion. Tickets available at livenation.com. Northbound West Loop 610, that's going to be quite sluggish coming up from Ireland. Still have the cleanup of a wreck happening in the two right lanes at Beach Dock at 6:30.
Marketplace is supported by Yubico, makers of the YubiKey. YubiKey helps protect important digital applications and services. YubiKey, still undefeated, the original passkey. More at yubico.com.
Today's program brought to you by the rock and the hard place between which the Federal Reserve now finds itself. From American Public Media, this is Marketplace.
Marketplace is supported by Viking, dedicated to bringing travelers to the heart of each destination with small ship, river, ocean, and expedition voyages, offering cultural enrichment and immersive experiences. Discover more at Viking.com. And by Progressive. Progressive Commercial Insurance protects small businesses from retailers to tradespeople. Progressive covers a variety of business needs with a range of coverages. More at ProgressiveCommercial.com.
In Los Angeles, I'm Kai Risnall. It is Thursday, today the 11th of September. Good as always to have you along, everybody. That rock and the hard place betwixt which the central bank now is actually codified in law, the Full Employment and Balanced Growth Act of 1978 by name. Okay, it says in relevant part that it shall be the economic policy of the United States to have, among other things, price stability and full employment. That, as you know, has come through the years to be known as the Federal Reserve's dual mandate. They got to do both things. And here we find ourselves, mid to late 2025, with the opposing sides of that mandate in some degree of tension. The labor market, as we know, is slowing, and inflation, the latest read of which we got this morning with the August Consumer Price Index, is nudging higher, 2.9% over this time last year. So, Marketplace's Samantha Fields reports now on what the Fed is seeing as it settles in between that rock and that hard place.
Nothing about the latest inflation or jobs numbers is all that bad. Inflation is right around 3%, and the unemployment rate is a little over 4%.
But here's the problem. It's not the level of these variables, it's the trend. They are moving in the wrong direction.
And Kevin Jakes, a former economist at the Treasury Department, says the Fed has one tool to try to fix that problem: interest rates. If they decide to cut rates,
inflation would go up, but unemployment would go down.
And if they decide to leave rates high, that could keep inflation down, but might push unemployment up. Ann Owen at Hamilton College says that creates a dilemma for the Fed.
Because they can lower rates to improve labor market conditions, or they can choose not to lower rates to keep downward pressure on inflation.
But they can't do both. For the last couple of years, she says the Fed's focus has clearly been inflation. It had gotten high and employment had stayed solid, so the priority was clear. But
the predictions about the labor market and the information coming from the labor market is screaming a lot louder than inflation right now.
So the Fed's focus might shift to the other half of its dual mandate, maximum employment. Bill English at the Yale School of Management says it's not as clear-cut as it was a couple of years ago what to prioritize, though, because inflation isn't exactly where the Fed wants it to be either.
They continue to have to trade off the outlook for inflation and the outlook for employment, and also the risks to those things. And that's hard to get right.
Still, he says that's what they're trying to do. I'm Samantha Fields for Marketplace.
Wall Street today, in contrast to the Fed and the jam it is in, traders do seem to think they are sitting pretty. We will have the details when we do the numbers. many bright spots in the U.S. labor market at this particular moment. But not many does not mean none. Healthcare jobs are growing, which tracks. America's getting older, and we all still get sick, no matter how the rest of the economy is doing. A bit more surprising, perhaps, is that the coffee shop or the pizza place down the street probably still has a help wanted sign in the window. Employment at food services and drinking places grew by about 17,000 June to August, so says the BLS. And overall, the restaurant industry's up 120,000 jobs year over year. Marketplace's Matt Levin reports.
The Allston is a new steakhouse in Chicago's Gold Coast neighborhood. It opened in May. As you'd expect for a fancy steakhouse in a fancy part of town that also offers something called tableside duck press, the steak ain't cheap.
It ranges from, high 50s all the way into, if you're going into some of the real specialty Wagyus, $300-400.
Scott Weiner is part of the ownership group for the Allston. The tableside duck press thing is $225, if you're wondering. If you think with a weakening job market and sticky inflation and all this general economic agita out there, consumers may not have much of an appetite for $100 steak, you'd be wrong. Weekend reservations at the Allston are booked out weeks in advance.
If you think about the income gap, right, it tells me that the people that have money have a lot of it and they're spending it.
Nationally, restaurant spending is up almost 6% over the last year. While higher-income foodies are still splurging on fine dining, middle-income consumers don't want to give up one of the indulgences they can still afford. Chad Moutre is an economist at the National Restaurant Association.
You hear that people might be not taking vacations, they might not be going out and making those big purchases, but people still want to go out to eat.
You already canceled that trip to the Bahamas, no need to cancel the trip to Chili's. Return to office mandates and higher grocery costs have also likely lured more customers away from their ovens and air fryers at home. Moutre says a surprisingly steady flow of diners is keeping restaurant hiring relatively strong.
The toughest positions to hire are number one, managers, right? But you also have a lot of demand for chefs and for cooks, and especially those where it's more of a scratch kitchen.
Job postings for food service managers and food prep workers were up by 26,000 this summer compared to last, according to the labor data company Lightcast. Some of those positions, though, they may be open only because they used to be filled by undocumented immigrants. Ron Hetrick is an economist with Lightcast.
People were like, look, I can't come to work because I'm afraid that I might, be sent out of the country. So they just didn't show up.
Despite those deportation fears, restaurants are having an easier time filling positions than they did during that whole post-pandemic Great Resignation era. Chicago restaurateur Scott Weiner says he filled 150 positions for the opening of the Allston pretty quickly. Applications came in from everywhere.
Honestly, all walks of life. We've had founders of startups that have come in looking for jobs or just, trying to see what you might have.
Tech is one of those industries that's not hiring so much at the moment. I'm Matt Levin for Marketplace.
The great thing about government economic data is that you can drill way down should you be so inclined. And we, of course, are. Inflation's running 2.9%, as I said. That's year on year. The category that's up the most since last year? Energy services. Electricity up 6.2%. Utility-delivered natural gas up 13.8%. Marketplace's Daniel Ackerman is on that one.
One reason electricity costs so much right now, the economy just needs more of it.
Demand is actually skyrocketing all over the place.
Ellen Wald of the Atlantic Council says that's a new trend in the past couple of years.
It used to be that electricity demand was actually fairly consistent. It didn't really go up all that much.
Now, though, there's a push to electrify machines that burn fossil fuels, like cars and furnaces.
And then you have the data centers.
AI firms are tripping over themselves to build them. Their copious energy needs are usually met by electric utilities, says Amy Myers-Jaffe of New York University.
They make these investments in new generation capacity and wires, and they pass that on to their ratepayers.
Ratepayers, including you and me. Jaffe says growing exports of natural gas are also raising prices for domestic consumers. And that is happening just as utilities are spending more in the wake of climate disasters, says Arvind Ravikumar at the University of Texas at Austin.
With hurricanes that have been devastating in Houston, there's been discussions of burying power lines, which is expensive.
Even in places not recovering from disaster, Ravikumar says wear and tear is starting to show in electricity distribution systems.
These are the poles, the wires, the substations that supply electricity to our homes.
He says for decades, many utilities have focused on building new infrastructure. That's left a lot of deferred maintenance on what's already there.
Upgrading and maintaining of sort of local distribution systems have needed to be done for a long time. We have just postponed the problem and kicked the can down the road.
Ravikumar says now utilities can't do that anymore, and we are going to keep feeling it in our energy bills. I'm Daniel Ackerman for Marketplace.
Caution, please mind the speed.
There's been, as you know, a complete 180 from the Biden administration to the Trump in climate change policy. As Daniel Ackerman was just telling us, the energy we need to power this economy is only going to get more expensive, and we are going to need a whole lot more of it. That's the national story. Things do look a little different, though, when you get down to the state and city level. Exhibit A for us today, Ann Arbor, Michigan, which is starting up something called a sustainable energy utility that'll let locals opt in to city-owned microgrids. Missy Stultz is the Director of Sustainability and Innovation for the city, also one of the architects behind that program. Thanks for coming on the program.
Oh, Kai, such a pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me.
For those perhaps unfamiliar, what is a microgrid?
Yeah, well, so like a mini little grid, if you will. Simplest way to think about this, imagine 2 or 3 houses connected together, generating their own power, sharing it over small scale distribution lines like what you see outside. So you got your generation, you got some batteries, and you're sharing that power across property lines.
The grids might be micro. The task, however, is not. Why is the city doing this?
Well, I think another question, too, is why not? We're at a moment in time where we've got a culmination of issues we're trying to solve for. We've got here in Ann Arbor a pretty unreliable grid. We've got global climate change happening, and we're feeling the impacts here. We also have an affordability crisis, right? Energy prices are going up significantly. Well, reliability, resilience from a climate perspective, affordability, and clean can all be solved if you generate energy kind of where you use it, as opposed to moving it across lots of long distance poles and wires. So we just kind of challenged the current energy model and said, what if we think about this a little bit differently?
This is an infrastructure investment on the part of the city. Cities, as we know, are strapped. You got to finance this thing and figure out how to pay for it, yeah?
Yeah, I mean, right? Sure we do, but we have to finance
you don't seem
things all the
troubled,
time.
right? Yeah.
No. I mean, one, we're already invested in our energy systems, right? We know we need a lot of energy, and guess what? We're going to use more energy as we have advancements in more data centers, and we're using more kind of AI of everything that's advancing. So we're going to have to make investments in energy. It's just a critical part of our life. Well, the good news is cities can get dollars generally for cheaper than private market companies can, and because renewables are more affordable, and no matter what policies we put in place, like that truth is just here. And so we can actually bypass a lot of the quagmires of the existing energy system and do it in a financially viable way by generating locally.
I was checking out your CV before we got on the phone, as one does. You have a PhD in urban resilience, right?
Oh, I do. It's so wonky.
Okay. Well, but it's very, appropriate to the subject at hand. But I'm going to ask you the bigger picture question beyond just Ann Arbor, right? Even though you had 80% approval of this move within the city, Ann Arbor's a college town, it's blue. Talk to me about scaling this thing to solve the national problem that we have.
Yeah, well, let me also give just a little bit of background that the sustainable energy utility is only authorized to generate from renewable energy. It cannot touch any fossil system. That was in the vote. It also is supplemental. So we are not trying to take over our existing infrastructure. There's a lot of kind of nuance that each individual community has to look at. But Before we got here, my team ran solar programs, and we saw 1,000% growth in solar adoption just through some of the incentive programs that we've run here. That's transferable. That's scalable no matter where you are in the U.S. or even in the world. So you can't take everything I'm doing and just do it in fill in the blank Lewis, Delaware. But what you can do is figure out what works in Lewis, Delaware, and take the models and apply them in your place. So this is transferable, just not A/B. It might be a more circuitous route.
Let me ask you what is a political question, and look, if you want to duck it, since you're a city official, I guess I'll understand. But this is not a moment at the federal level where what you're trying to do is treated with great favor, and I guess I wonder how you think about that, or don't you?
Oh no, I would reframe it to say nothing about what I do has ever been fully supported, right? Our entire systems are set up to move towards extraction. They are not set up to be regenerative and in relation with our natural systems. Like, that's just not how we've been for the last fill-in-the-blank decades. And Kai, what's the alternative? I mean, literally, what is the alternative? Is it that I'm going to continue with runaway climate change impacts that are flooding my communities, causing asthma attacks, wildfire smoke that's choking young lungs? Like, that's just not a viable alternative. And so we say in Ann Arbor on my team, light shines brightest in the dark, and boy, is it a dark moment. But guess what? We're going to shine, right? Like, we're going to shine. So game on.
Missy Stultz, she's the Director of Sustainability, also in Innovation for the City of Ann Arbor, Michigan. Missy, thanks a lot. I appreciate your time.
It's such a pleasure. Thanks, Kai.
Coming up.
I only charge $125 an hour for my house, so it is definitely just a side hustle.
All the world's a stage, you know, even your house.
Turn left.
But first, let's do the numbers. Dow Industrial's up 617 points today, just over 1 1/3%, 46,108 for the blue chips. The Nasdaq added 157 points, about 0.7%, 22,043. The S&P 500 up 55, almost 0.9%, 65,87. Hey, how about some more CPI, huh? Food at home up 0.6%, the biggest monthly jump in more than 3 years. Fruit and vegetables up 1.6%. Tomatoes, quick, fruit or vegetable, huh? Up 4.5%. Also this morning, grocer Kroger raised its sales and profit forecast for the year. Shares up 0.3% today. Another big jump in the price of used cars and trucks, 1% on the nose in August, 6% over 12 months if you happen to be in the market. Used car retailer Carvana slipped 3%. Bonds rose, yield on the 10-year T-note down 4.02%. It was below 4 at one point during the session. You're listening to Marketplace.
The Numbers is supported by Odoo.com, your entire business on one platform. Marketplace is supported by Avalara, providing businesses with cloud-based tools and managed services for property tax compliance. From filing returns to tracking assessments, Avalara can help. Learn more at avalara.com/propertytax. And by the University of Illinois' Geese College of Business, offering a completely online MBA program that learners can take at their own pace while engaging with classmates around the globe. Learn more at onlinemba.illinois.edu. And by the United States Postal Service, offering postage stamps for purchase at checkout at over 40,000 participating supermarkets and drugstores, and at wholesale clubs Costco, Walmart, Sam's Club, and BJ's.
648, you're listening to News 87.
There's no person who can replace Charlie Kirk. It's pretty unchallengeable that he was singularly gifted at the art of speaking with fluency and a total conviction about the virtues of conservatism as practiced by Donald Trump.
I'm Michael Barbaro. That's Today on the Daily from the New York Times.
We'll have that for you next, top of the hour, 7 o'clock. Support comes from members like you and from UT Health Houston, home to McGovern Medical School, and Dr. Charles Cox, who's focused on reversing brain damage with his patients' own stem cells. More about the many faces of UT Health Houston at uth.edu/manyfaces. And from LaPorte CPAs and Business Advisors, an independent accounting and business advisory firm serving clients for more than 75 years with 190 employees across offices in Houston, New Orleans, and other locations. More information at laporte.com.
This is Marketplace. I'm Kai Rizdal. This is none of my business, of course, but what is your personal risk tolerance, financially? I'm asking because the Trump administration wants to make it easier for you to be more risk-on in your retirement accounts, specifically to give you the chance to invest in private equity. Think, say, hedge funds that buy companies, take them private, and usually turn them around for a quick profit. Usually there was doing a lot of work because while the rewards can be higher in those kinds of investments, so too can the risks, as Marketplace's Nova Safo explains.
Investors have poured in some $24 trillion into private equity markets, which have three main components. Steve Kaplan, professor of entrepreneurship and finance at the University of Chicago, says the first is venture capital firms which invest in startups.
Then another group would be companies that are bought by private equity firms, call them in buyouts.
Like this summer when private equity firm Sycamore Partners bought out Walgreens. The third component in private markets is credit.
The buyouts in particular get funded not by banks any longer, but by private credit funds,
which pool investor resources and make loans. It's all about high risk, high reward. A startup could fail or succeed spectacularly. A buyout could turn a company around or it could go bankrupt. Managers who run private funds have been pushing to open up access to employer-sponsored accounts, namely 401ks. The Biden administration was not sold. The Trump administration is listening. Josh Lerner is a private markets researcher at Harvard Business School.
They've undertaken a series of steps that make it easier for institutions to offer 401k holders the ability to invest in private equity.
Last month, the president ordered the Labor Department and other agencies to review their policies. Soon after, the Labor Department rescinded a Biden-era effort to limit the practice. But even if the Trump administration is ultimately successful in lowering barriers, Lerner is skeptical employers and 401k administrators will race into private equity markets.
Traditionally, one of the big fears has been that of legal liability.
For instance, they're worried workers will sue over the higher fees charged by private funds, which could eat away at lifetime gains. Private funds are also complex instruments, difficult to understand even for professionals. Add to that concerns about the quality of some of the underlying assets in private equity. Lenore Palladino is an associate professor of economics and public policy at the University of Massachusetts.
Private equity firms have had a harder time selling off the companies that they had purchased when the time that they want to hold that company is up.
And they need to sell to pay back previous investors.
And so they're essentially looking for a fresh pot of money for them to use in their deal making.
The $12 trillion in assets sitting in 401ks and other employer-sponsored accounts look awfully fresh. Palladino worries everyday investors could end up holding the bag for past investments that have not panned out.
It's really clear that, the smart money is already getting out, and so now it's time to bring in the dumb money.
But Steve Kaplan at the University of Chicago says it's in the interests of big money managers who live on the fees associated with running private funds to figure out a way to make those investments attractive to 401k plan administrators.
You're protected by the fact that the intermediaries, let's say it's a BlackRock, have an incentive to provide product that is good for investors, because if they get it right, then they get more money and make more money over time.
There are already some moves in this direction. In May, retirement services provider Empower announced new private investment trusts on offer. But individuals would have to meet with an advisor first before adding them to their 401ks. I'm Nova Safo for Marketplace.
line item from today's Consumer Price Index. The cost of shelter was up 0.4% last month. Once again, the biggest single factor driving inflation higher. It makes sense given how big that expense is compared to all the other things that people buy. There are ways to offset the cost of housing, though, if you're creative, maybe with a sense of adventure. Here's today's installment of our series, Adventures in Housing.
My name is Jill Narstead, and I live in Chicago, Illinois. I have a little side hustle renting my home that we live in out to productions here in Chicago. I have my home listed on an app called PeerSpace that producers look through. We, text back and forth through the app, and then I clear out my family and my dog, and they come in, and the first thing I say when the production team walks in is, make yourself at home. A thing they love about my house is that it's lived in. It looks like a gingerbread house. It's got a little peaked roof. I've been told there's a lot of different nooks and crannies that you can photograph or film in, so I've had several repeat customers. One of them is social media campaigns for a dog food dispenser. And then another one that I've had several times is a jewelry company that I've never heard of, Tuna, a giant printer company like your desktop printer. We're very popular with student films because I'm a bleeding heart, and they'll shoot one day and rent the house for one day and then call me desperately needing the next day, to which I'll say yes, and then they'll call me desperately needing just one more day. It's just been really fun, like pulling back the curtain and seeing so much that goes into production.
Go straight on.
Whole houses can go for, up to $500 an hour. I only charge $125 an hour for my house. So it is definitely just a side hustle. One of my favorite things about renting my house out is the people that come in. I just met a new neighbor recently, and she was like, what was going on at your house the other day? And I explained to her, and she looked at me and she was like, you're like the fun mom.
Keep right.
And I was like, dang, I am. But it's like, boy, can life get mundane, and it's something for people to talk about, and I love that for them and for me.
Dang, I am. That was Jill Narstead giving her neighbors in Chicago something to talk about. We want you to talk about your adventure in housing. You can do it at marketplace.org.
Marketplace is supported by Solidigm. Today's AI ambitions require a different approach to storage. Solidigm offers solid-state storage solutions optimized for AI with higher capacities, greater speed, and energy efficiency. StorageForAI.com. And by Odoo, dedicated to providing software designed to scale with businesses. Odoo's programs for manufacturing, accounting, and more aim to provide building blocks for creating a custom software suite. Odoo, what businesses need.
This final note on the way out, ticker symbol O of the day around here is WBD, Warner Brothers Discovery. The company has been challenged the past couple of years, you might say, since the Warner Brothers buyout by Discovery's David Zaslav. Anyway, WBD shares up almost 30% today after the Wall Street Journal reported that Paramount Skydance, also in the news of late, Skydance bought Paramount, and not for nothing, CBS News, you probably read about that. Anyway, the Journal says Skydance and its boss David Ellison, son of Oracle's Larry, turns out he now wants WBD. Mostly in cash, by the way, too. Our daily production team includes Andy Corbin, Nicholas Guillaume, Maria Hollenhorst, Iru Ekpanobi, Sarah Leeson, Sean McHenry, Sophia Terenzio. I'm Kai Rizdal. We will see you tomorrow, everybody. This is APM.
Turn right.
Minute before 7 on the day before Friday, evening before Friday, if you would prefer that. And you're listening to your NPR station, News 88.7. Well, about 6.5 hours ago, a big rig lost a load on the northbound side of the West Loop 610 right around Beach Dot, and they are still working to clean it up. 2 right lanes are taken away. You're going to be slow coming up from Mireland.
Support for Houston Public Media comes from Live Nation, presenting Trans-Siberian Orchestra 2025 Winter Tour, The Ghosts of Christmas Eve, coming to Toyota Center on Friday, December 19th. Tickets at toyotacenter.com.
We're half an hour away from sunset, clear overnight with a low around 76. Tomorrow's sunrise at 7:05. Sunny with afternoon highs around 92 to 95. It'll be that way at least until Tuesday, when we have a very slight chance of an afternoon pop-up shower or two. Right now it's 90 here at your NPR station, KUHF Houston News 88.7, a service of the University of Houston. I'm David Pittman. We'll do it all over again tomorrow afternoon, starting at 2 at 7 o'clock.
He possessed these oratorical gifts. He possessed a real organizational savvy, and he possessed this remarkable ability to woo and galvanize donors. People like that don't grow on trees. I really don't know what Turning Point USA does without Charlie Kirk.
I'm Michael Barbaro. That's coming up on The Daily from the New York Times.
The Daily is supported by BetterHelp, committed to helping clients with issues ranging from relationship challenges and goal setting to grief and depression. Learn more at betterhelp.com/public.
And by the United States Postal Service, offering stamps for purchase at over 40,000 supermarkets and drugstores, and at wholesale clubs Costco, Walmart, Sam's Club, and BJ's.
And by American Public Media.
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Dan Ronan. Young conservative politicians and organizers are grieving the loss of Charlie Kirk. The far-right activist was 31 when he was shot and killed Wednesday during an event at Utah Valley University. As NPR's Elena Moore reports, many of his followers say they were inspired by his career.
Kirk had millions of followers on social media and had become an influential voice in GOP politics. He was also the head of a massive political organizing network and helped some folks decide to run for office themselves. Florida Congresswoman Anna Paulina Luna is 36 and says in many ways she got her start because of Kirk. She used to work for his group, Turning Point USA.
I am in office and owe my political career to Charlie Kirk. I wish that he was around so that he could help rise up others like me.
Kirk had his critics, but within the MAGA movement, he was celebrated. And now many of his followers are calling for his memory to drive more young people into politics. Elena Moore, NPR News, Washington.
UN Security Council members put out a statement condemning this week's strike on Qatar, but did not mention Israel in the text of their press release. NPR's Michelle Kellerman reports the council is meeting in an urgent session to discuss the Israeli strike.
A top UN official, Rosemary DiCarlo, says the Israeli strike on Qatar shocked the world.
It was an alarming escalation, especially since it targeted individuals who were reportedly gathered to discuss the latest U.S. proposal for a ceasefire and hostage release deal in Gaza.
U.S. Ambassador Dorothy Shea says Qatar has been working very hard and very bravely to broker peace, and she says the unilateral bombing does not advance Israeli or U.S. goals, but she tried to keep the focus on Hamas, calling on them to release all the hostages they've held for nearly 2 years. Michelle Kellerman, NPR News, the State Department.
New federal restrictions on who is now eligible for the updated COVID-19 vaccines are making it harder for people to get vaccinated. NPR's Rob Stein has our report.
Many people can still easily get one of the new COVID vaccines because they're 65 or older, or simply attest to the pharmacist that they have a risk factor for serious COVID complications. But many others are being turned away because they don't meet the new requirements or don't have a prescription. That's what happened to Jason Mitten when the healthy 55-year-old tried to get vaccinated at a pharmacy near his home in Austin, Texas.
I think it's ridiculous, honestly. I think it should be a person's right to choose to get the vaccine or not. Yeah, I'm angry about it.
A federal advisory committee meets next week to issue recommendations that could make it easier for more people to get a COVID vaccine. Rob Stein, NPR News.
And this is NPR News. Brazil's Supreme Court today voted 4-1 to convict the country's former president, Jair Bolsonaro, of attempting a coup to remain in office in 2022. This despite being defeated at the polls. The justices a short time ago sentenced him to 27 years and 3 months in prison. He has maintained he is not guilty and can appeal the decision. President Trump, who is an ally of Bolsonaro at the White House, said he was very unhappy with the ex-leader's prosecution. The U.S. has already imposed 50% tariffs on Brazilian goods as a result. Secretary of State Marco Rubio called the verdict a witch hunt. The makers of South Park are reacting to Charlie Kirk's assassination. Paramount has removed a recent episode that parodied Kirk from its broadcast rotation. NPR's Andrew Limbong has more.
Comedy Central reruns South Park in the early morning hours, and it's set to air episode 1 from the most recent season and episode 3. Episode 2, however, titled Got a Nut, features the character Cartman turning into a Charlie Kirk-esque online debater.
I have my arguments down rock solid. These young college girls are totally unprepared, so I can just destroy them and also edit out all the ones that actually argue back well.
When it came out, Charlie Kirk was a good sport about the episode. Here's how Kirk reacted to it on his own show.
I think a lot of it was hilarious towards me. I think a lot of this is go through. I gotta be honest. Some of it was very funny.
The episode is still available to stream on Paramount Plus and Comedy Central on demand. Andrew Limbong, NPR News.
On Wall Street, the Dow, the Nasdaq, and the S&P all finished strongly higher today. From Washington, this is NPR News. I'm Dan Roman.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include the Alfred P. Sloan Foundation, supporting books, radio, podcasts, film, television, theater, and more to bridge science and the humanities. And the listeners who support this NPR station.
At about noon on Wednesday, Charlie Kirk, the conservative organizer, activist, and media mogul, takes the stage for the latest stop on what he's been calling the American Comeback Tour. It's a series of talks that he's holding at colleges across the country. This stop was at Utah Valley University. It's about 30 minutes south of Salt Lake City. As the event gets underway, Kirk starts to work the audience of about 3,000 people.
In the best lives that Utah has to offer.
He starts tossing Trump-themed hats into the crowd. Then he settles into a chair underneath a tent where he prepares to field questions in a debate format that Kirk likes to call Prove Me Wrong. A few minutes into this, Kirk is asked the kind of question that he relishes by a liberal-sounding person in the audience.
So, do you know how many transgender Americans have been mass shooters over the last 10 years? Too many.
This person follows up, trying to establish just how rare it is for a trans person to carry out a mass shooting. Kirk responds with a follow-up question of his own.
Counting or not counting gang violence? Great.
When suddenly, a single shot rings out. Kirk slumps over. Blood begins to pour out of his neck. He falls out of the chair. It is clear that he is gravely wounded. People in the crowd start to scream, and then they start to run. Meanwhile, Kirk is rushed to a car, then taken to a nearby hospital, where a short time later, he's declared dead. The moment that the news becomes official, there is an outpouring of grief from the country's most prominent conservatives.
They're reporting that Charlie has died. That he's dead. At the age of 31.
Megyn Kelly weeps on air. So does Glenn Beck.
There's no way he survived that.
And over at Fox News, the anchors observe a moment of silence for Kirk in the middle of their broadcast.
Charlie, we love you. I don't know where we go from here in a news program, and I don't know where we go from here in America.
the New York Times, I'm Michael Barbaro. This is The Daily. Today, the story of how Charlie Kirk built a conservative empire that brought millions of young Americans into the Republican Party and to the ballot box for Donald Trump. I speak to my colleague, Robert Draper, about Kirk's improbable rise to power, his stunning assassination, and his controversial legacy. It's Thursday, September 11th. Robert, thank you for making time for us on a difficult evening.
Sure thing, Michael.
Can you just describe how it is you learned that Charlie Kirk had died?
Yes, when I saw a report that Kirk had been shot, I contacted Kirk's communications director, Andrew Colvett, who confirmed to me that he had been shot in the neck, but that he didn't have any other details. Colvett wasn't with him that day. So my phone had kind of blown up, and then my editor had contacted me to let me know that Kirk had apparently died, but she would like confirmation, and could I get it? So I reached out to Andrew Colvett again, and he did pick up, and in an extremely emotional voice confirmed that Charlie Kirk, who had worked with for years and who was like a brother to him, had died of an assassin's bullet. And after sort of working through my astonishment, it occurred to me, Michael, that Charlie Kirk was, in a sense, killed in the line of duty, or at least duty as he defined it.
Explain that.
Yeah. I mean, he was on a campus. He was at Utah Valley University campus speaking to young people, which happened to be the mission statement of the organization that he co-founded, Turning Point USA. I think that after Trump himself, no one was more responsible for the Republicans winning over young voters to the extent that they did in 2024 than Kirk and his group. The thing about Kirk is that he became a media personality, a close advisor to the Trump family, to the president himself. But at bottom, he was still a youth organizer. And so there he was. You know, it's well after Trump's last election, showing up, doing the thing that he was famous for.
Well, tell us the story, Robert, of how it is that Kirk came to this work of essentially evangelizing for the Republican Party, for Donald Trump in particular, among young people, and how he became so successful at it. You closely cover the conservative movement in the United States for the Times, and you spent weeks traveling with Kirk to try to piece together that very story for us.
Yes, I mean, we'll start with two facts. One is that he grew up in a wealthy Chicago suburb, Prospect Heights, a member of a conservative family, and so was a conservative kid himself. And we should mention that Kirk died at the age of 31. So we're talking about during his teenage years. He grew up during the Obama era, and all of his classmates were big fans of Obama's. Right. And Kirk could see why they were. He could see why Obama was cool, why Obama had appeal, and why, correspondingly, the Republican Party had its work cut out for him, because they were seen as somewhat fossilized. And he was a political nerd. He wasn't just that. He was a basketball player on his high school team, but he loved Rush Limbaugh, and he would, during lunch hours, go sequester himself and listen to Limbaugh by himself. Kirk is graduating from high school, thinking of going to college, but not quite sure where to go and exactly what he wants to make of himself. And in 2009 and 2010, the Tea Party was underway, having events all over Illinois, and Kirk starts showing up to them as this articulate young voice. And these older people in the audience, Tea Party activists, particularly this guy named Bill Montgomery, saw Charlie Kirk and thought, Charlie, you can go places. He not only encouraged Kirk to continue to speak at these events, but to forego a college education. Essentially, he was saying, you know, you can do a lot more for the movement. And then it was along with Bill Montgomery that he established Turning Point USA. Not entirely sure what it would be.
I'm a son of the American Revolution. My sister's a daughter of the American Revolution.
He only knew that this was something he loved, that he was getting attention for doing it, and that he was filling a void.
Every single person that believes in fiscal responsibility, limited government, and not spending more money to take in gets one person that did not vote last time vote in this election. We win by a landslide.
That there weren't young people around going on college and, for that matter, high school campuses trying to proselytize young people.
That takes you going out in the public square and challenge the ideals, not being afraid of debate like what we're doing.
And what time period are we talking about here?
We're talking about 2014, 2015, but then crucially, the Trump candidacy begins. And Kirk, like so many Republicans, was a little unsure about Trump, was more inclined to support Ted Cruz, but by March or April of 2016, when Trump was making sport of the Republican field, Kirk began, to realize, no, this is the guy who's got it. And Kirk endeavored to insinuate himself into that network. Kirk gets on the Trump family's radar through a succession of events that causes him to be introduced to Donald Trump Jr., the president's eldest son. And just a few minutes into it, Don Jr. said, look, I could use someone like you. And in a matter of minutes, Charlie Kirk was the assistant to the eldest son of candidate Trump, taking over Don Jr.'s social media account as well as his schedule. December of 2017, Don Jr. invited Kirk to Mar-a-Lago. Trump saw Kirk, had been hearing about Kirk, had been retweeting Kirk's denunciations of the left, motioned him to come over. And through that conversation came to charm Trump, as he had so many other older conservatives. And in turn,
thank you to everyone at Turning Point USA's Teen Student Action Summit. What a group.
That meant that Trump was a reliable keynote speaker at Turning Point USA events.
But I'm thrilled to be here tonight with thousands of proud, patriotic young Americans at Turning Point USA.
And Trump loved being in front of young people. So it's at that point that these Turning Point USA events really became almost over the top with theatrics.
Like what?
Strobes and smoke and crazy lights. They really became like rock concerts. Kirk was sort of an early avatar of the anti-wokeness that became so popular amongst conservatives later.
Look, young people on college campuses, who are you rebelling against exactly, right? I mean, if you want to be a rebel on a college campus, fight for freedom, fight for free speech.
The pitch becomes, be a conservative, because that will allow you to speak your mind, to truly be free, and to buck this oppressive system of liberalism all around you on college campuses. And it feels like what's innovative about Kirk's pitches is that at this moment, conservatism can become the counterculture.
Yes, because Kirk's argument is that it is the left that is suppressing dissent. So it's during this period that Turning Point USA experiences tremendous growth with hundreds of chapters across U.S. campuses. And Kirk has begun to build a viable, very well-funded network that includes a strong media presence with his own podcast and a website that's churning out news stories. But the real test of what to do with all this, where this power can have its real effect, is actually after President Trump loses in 2020 and seeks to come back to political office. And Charlie Kirk, who remains by Trump's side after many Republicans abandoned him after January the 6th, plays an instrumental role in that. And his own influence really skyrockets during that period.
We'll be right back.
The Daily is supported by Seed. Seed's DS-01 is a 24-strain, 2-in-1 probiotic and prebiotic engineered to survive digestion, support healthy regularity, and promote whole body health. Learn more at seed.com/public.
Rigorous reporting told through a human lens. Go deeper into the most important stories of the day with The Daily, an audio series from the New York Times. Distribution of The Daily is made possible by American Public Media. APM produces and distributes programs that entertain and engage audiences everywhere.
Support for Houston Public Media comes from listeners like you and from St. Luke's Health and the St. Luke's Foundation, supporting clinical excellence, compassionate care, and a healthier future for all. More at supportstlukes.org.
I'm Aisha Roscoe, host of Weekend Edition Sunday, where we're not just interested in what's going on in the world, but why it's happening and how. Details are important, so are different points of view. We're dedicated to bringing you the stories behind the big events and the small ones too. Join us every Sunday morning for Weekend Edition from NPR News.
Weekend Edition, Saturdays and Sundays from 7 to 9 a.m. on News 88.7.
Support comes from Berkman International, providing insights into workplace dynamics and individual needs to help organizations develop talent, improve communication, strengthen retention, and drive innovation. More at berkman.com/connect.
I speak to my colleague, Robert Draper, about Charlie Kirk's improbable rise to power, his stunning assassination, and his controversial legacy. Robert, once President Trump loses in 2020 and ends up in the political wilderness, Kirk is, by your account, ascendant. So what happens in this partnership?
Well, for one thing, Kirk never left Trump.
What is going on with all the ballot fraud, voter registration fraud, the irregularities?
It's worth recalling that Kirk was really at the forefront of 2020 election denialism. Kirk was going to campuses and speaking at other events saying that the election had been stolen from Trump.
In Pennsylvania, there was a 1,776% increase in voter registration for 90-plus-year-olds in Pennsylvania.
And that was his story, and he was sticking to it just as Trump was. Mm-hmm. And I have to say, when you think about Kirk, we haven't established this yet, but really is an ardent Christian.
No. Trans people are not normal people. That's not correct.
I think that's so disrespectful.
No, it's not disrespectful.
I know you're obviously very anti-trans.
No, I'm pro-reality.
You must be a Nazi.
You see, the left can't have a dialogue, so they just call names.
And so Kirk, through just the sheer volume of his condemnations of the left, began to take on added prominence in his own right, but particularly as this unflagging defender of the former president in exile.
My sense, Robert, is that at this point, Kirk is something pretty unique in the American political system. He is a celebrity political warrior saying outrageous things. I mean, I can remember a tirade he went on against Martin Luther King, of all people, and called him a bad guy. He said that the Civil Rights Act of 1964 was a mistake. And yet that media empire sits astride a get-out-the-vote political operation that itself is on a scale that's pretty much unrivaled.
Yes, and we should establish, too, that as Kirk's celebrity grew, as his power as a conservative influencer began to augment itself, he was also applying it to the desire of getting Trump elected by establishing a true get-out-the-vote operation in swing states. But again, Kirk had, by this point, had the total faith of President Trump and of Trump's family and of Trump's most loyal donor base. And if Charlie Kirk said, this is what we need to do to win, these people fell in lockstep with him. And so he really began in 2024 in a way that he had not earlier to try to chase ballots and find unlikely voters and turn them out in key states like Wisconsin and Arizona. And one testament to Kirk's efforts came from Trump himself, who said privately to Kirk that you are one of the 3 or 4 people who are most responsible for me winning this election.
Wow. That's a stunning statement.
Yeah. Kirk actually asked me not to use that statement in the story, but I think it's okay to say it now.
And once Trump wins that second term, what we all began to notice he is suddenly operating